There's a bit of a catch-22 in the gaming industry, especially when it comes to a beloved franchise. On one hand, a new entry that sticks too closely to its predecessor risks feeling stale, mechanics remain largely unchanged, and the only fresh elements might be the story or setting. This often leads to releases that feel safe but uninspired, leaving fans disappointed and craving more. A prime example of this would be the Call of Duty series. On the flip side, developers might take bold risks to attract new players. Even when those risks pay off and take the franchise in an exciting direction, longtime fans can find themselves yearning for the way things used to be. The Legend of Zelda series is a prime example of this. Dragon Age: The Veilguard definitely falls in the latter category. BioWare's latest entry feels like a far cry from what the franchise once was, straying so far from its roots that it barely resembles the series fans fell in love with. As a long-time fan of the Dragon Age series, I eagerly awaited the release of the Veilguard. That said, I knew it probably wouldn't recapture the magic of Dragon Age Origins, and I was okay with that. I approached Veilguard with an open mind, excited to see the new ideas BioWare had in store. Unfortunately, after spending over 80 hours exploring its world and completing everything it had to offer, I reached the credits with a lingering sense of disappointment.
I wield the power of the light. Today, you face the finest child of the gods.
In my first dozen hours, I genuinely thought BioWare had succeeded in crafting a fresh and exciting entry in the Dragon Age series. The combat felt quick and fluid, blending traditional RPG elements with a dynamic hack-and-slash style. However, it didn't take long to realize that for every promising new feature, there were one or two glaring issues that significantly dampened my enjoyment. But let's break it down. Let's start with the combat. The slow, methodical strategy RPG that Dragon Age once was has been completely replaced with a hack-and-slash approach. To its credit, it's not a bad hack-and-slash. Combat is fast-paced and keeps you on your toes, requiring you to juggle various factors depending on your class and playstyle, as well as the companions you bring along. All classes share basic abilities including ranged and melee attacks, a dodge, and a block. However, the real depth comes from layering those with the unique abilities and passives of your character and your two companions, creating an intricate system that can be surprisingly engaging. Your character is limited to 3 equipped abilities at a time, which initially feels disappointingly restrictive. However, as I progressed, I discovered that the system offered much more depth than it first appeared. Beyond the 3 core abilities, your character also has access to an ultimate ability, 3 activatable runes with varying effects, and 6 companion abilities. These companion abilities effectively feel like an extension of your own skill set, as your companions don't do much independently outside of casting. On top of that, simpler abilities like the standard shield bash are no longer treated as an activatable skill, instead they're tied to your weapon. When you add it all up, you'll realize you could easily fill a skill bar or two with the sheer variety of attacks, abilities, and enchantments available at any given time. This arsenal of tools creates the potential for a unique and rewarding experience, encouraging players to capitalize on their abilities and equipment at just the right moment. Unfortunately, all of that potential is completely wasted because the game is so unbelievably easy. To be clear, I played the Veilguard on its hardest difficulty and I only died maybe 4 times. Most of these deaths happened because I was attempting content I was severely underleveled for. I'm not claiming to be some kind of expert, but the problem with the Veilguard is how ridiculously forgiving it is. To actually die, you have to be reduced to 1 health and then take 1 more hit, excluding damage over time effects. Even then, it's so easy to avoid attacks long enough to heal yourself. Early in the game, you're limited to carrying just 3 health potions, but you can easily replenish those by breaking green pots scattered throughout the world. There are usually enough of them during fights to keep you topped off mid-combat. On top of that, all companions have a healing spell on about a 30-second cooldown, so if you run out of potions and get knocked down to 1 health, all you need to do is dodge attacks until one of your companions can heal you. This might seem like a minor issue, but there are 2 key factors that really make it problematic. The first is just how easy it is to avoid attacks. Most enemies are slow and predictable, with a giant yellow warning above your head to signal when they're about to strike. On top of that, you have a ridiculously long window of invulnerability while dodging. If you play as the warrior class, you also have a shield that blocks 100% of damage from all directions as long as the shield is raised. The second major issue is that your companions are completely invulnerable. They can't take damage, they can't be incapacitated, and they can't die. So as long as you can survive for about 30 seconds, you're guaranteed to have some form of healing available to you. Really, the only thing that could kill you in this game is a lack of patience. As long as you're aware of your vulnerabilities and willing to wait out cooldowns, I'd bet the game won't pose much of a challenge for anybody. Additionally, all of those cool and interesting abilities I mentioned earlier are likely to take a back seat in favor of the primer and detonation system. Here's how it works. One of your companions applies a primer with their abilities. These primers are negative status effects like reduced defenses. You, as the player, then use one of your own abilities to detonate the primer. Alternatively, you can apply primers with your abilities and your companions will detonate them. When a primer is detonated, the status effect is removed, but the enemy is slowed and then explodes, causing damage to themselves and nearby enemies. The problem with this system is that the primers and detonations are by far the most effective way to win any battle. The sheer amount of AoE damage and crowd control they provide completely overshadows the utility or damage of any other abilities. This creates a repetitive cycle where you're just waiting for primer abilities to come off cooldown and then instantly detonating enemies or groups of enemies. Since all three of each companion's abilities share a cooldown, the only other ability worth using outside of a primer is a healing spell. The result is a monotonous loop that quickly becomes boring and uninspiring. Perhaps the most disappointing aspect of Dragon Age the Veilguard is the writing and storytelling. The plot itself is pretty basic. A group of around 10 individuals band together to rally the world's factions against an impending doom. That's fine, but the problem is that there's almost no depth to the characters you meet and form relationships with throughout the journey. You and your companions are just a group of heroes for the sake of being heroes. No one has any real character development or ulterior motives, and their likes and dislikes are mostly limited to food. There's no compelling personal drive behind anyone's actions beyond the generic "it's the right thing to do," and one conversation I had with a companion highlights this lack of depth where she asks your character Rook why he became the hero that he is. The dialogue options you're given are painfully shallow, with your only options being redemption, I guess someone has to, and I'm not sure. There are so many conversations throughout the game that, despite being completely scripted, feel awkward and out of place. There were even moments where I found myself feeling secondhand embarrassment for my character Rook because no matter what dialogue option I chose, he somehow manages to butcher the entire conversation.
I'm the same way, taking jobs that go wrong. I'm basically a walking disaster.
In classic BioWare fashion, you're given about 3 to 6 responses that are supposed to shape your relationships, influence how Rook reacts to situations, and in some cases, affect the story's outcome. Unfortunately, as is often the case with BioWare games, your options rarely reflect what Rook actually says. You're given roughly 5-word prompts, but it feels like a dice roll as to whether Rook will actually stick to what the prompt suggests. In the end, you're probably better off choosing your responses based on the symbol that dictates his tone. If you want to be mean, just pick the mean option and let Rook take it from there. Hopefully he'll get the point across. The story does explore some relatively deep themes worth paying attention to, like what it means to be a leader and a friend, or how to experience loss and move on with your life. But as you'd expect, the dialogue somehow manages to undercut these moments of emotional depth. For example, during the climax of one of your companion's quest lines, Rook decides to throw shade at a literal god, and unsurprisingly, it does not go well. I do need to give credit where credit is due. The character progression system in Dragon Age the Veilguard is extremely well thought out. You choose one of 3 classes, warrior, mage, or rogue, and select a background that supplements your playstyle. Beyond that, there's not much decision making in the initial character creation. The identity of your character develops over time as you acquire new skills, perks, and gear. What I really enjoyed about the progression system is how diverse it can be. While you'll likely focus on one of the 3 specializations within each class, the way the skill tree intertwines to create a web of skills and buffs allows for a high level of creativity and versatility with builds. BioWare also took a fresh approach to acquiring gear and equipment. Rather than stockpiling useless items, duplicates of an item upgrade the original to the next highest tier. Since every item can be upgraded to the max tier, everything you find feels useful in some way. Items also gain extremely powerful bonuses as they reach higher tiers, which can completely define a build. Even items that don't fit your current playstyle could be used in certain situations or saved for a future respec. On top of that, BioWare scrapped the classic open world approach and replaced it with more linear, explorable areas. This was a refreshing change because frankly I'm sick of huge open worlds filled with nothing. The downside, however, is that none of these areas really make any sense. Whoever designed them clearly wasn't interested in creating a world that felt authentic for people living there, but rather wanted to make a jungle gym for Rook to climb on. To be fair, this makes sense considering Rook's childish demeanor, but why am I spending time doing feats of parkour, especially when my character can't even swim? The game is also visually impressive. Even if the art style may not appeal to everyone, the scenery can be quite breathtaking at times, and paired with a score by Hans Zimmer, Veilguard delivers a solid visual and auditory experience. At the end of the day, Dragon Age the Veilguard turned out to be exactly what I expected. I wasn't disappointed, but I wasn't blown away either. It met my expectations, though those expectations were admittedly low. The gameplay and writing felt like they were tailored for a younger audience. If this game had been released when I was 14, I might have enjoyed it more. But as I've grown older and my tastes have shifted, Dragon Age the Veilguard ultimately left me wanting more. I appreciate it when developers make bold changes. Unfortunately, BioWare missed the mark with the new Dragon Age entry, and I think I speak for a lot of us when I say they should have just stuck with what made the franchise so great.
Darling. You're adorable.
Thank you everybody for watching. If you liked what you saw, be sure to like and subscribe and follow us on Twitch for live content. Until next time, cheers!